Ready for your mind to be blown. Today, we're diving deep into this idea, this concept that the most amazing transformations, the ones that really make you go, wow, in the universe, and maybe in our own lives too, they can happen in the blink of an eye, like poof, just like that.
It's true. Our human perception of time, it can really, really limit us.
Totally.
We get so caught up in the day-to-day, but then you zoom out and consider the universe, the power of creation, and suddenly, our whole understanding of time, it's flipped on its head.
It's true, and that's what we're exploring today. We're diving into a blink of an eye, God's power and the universe. And this book, it doesn't waste any time. It launches us straight into the vastness of space. Like you'd think out there, everything's moving slowly, majestically. Turns out, not the case at all, right?
Not even close. Think about the life of a star, right? It could be around for millions, even billions of years.
I mean, to us, that's like unimaginable.
Exactly. But on a cosmic scale, that whole lifespan, from a star's birth to its death, is just a blip.
Okay, I need a visual here. We're talking about stars exploding, right? So help me wrap my head around it. What's that look like from like a universal perspective?
Imagine a supernova. Picture this. A gigantic star, way, way bigger than our sun, reaches the end of its life. Then, boom, it explodes with just unbelievable force, this massive burst of energy. It blasts elements, things like oxygen, carbon, iron, the building blocks for new worlds, across the galaxy. And this whole spectacular event, this cosmic reset button that shapes galaxies, it happens in a fraction of a second.
It's incredible, isn't it? Makes you realize that while we're here worrying about our to-do lists, the universe is this crazy, ever-changing, dynamic place. It's constantly moving, evolving, transforming, and we're just a tiny, tiny part of it.
And it's not just exploding stars. The book talks about galaxies, too, those massive collections of stars and planets. They can form, collide, even vanish, and on the universe's timeline.
Yeah.
It's like it's happening in fast forward.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
For sure.
It's like the universe has its own fast-forward button. But, things get even more interesting when we take this blink of an eye idea and apply it to, like, the biggest question of all creation itself. Where did everything come from?
And that's where things get really mind-blowing. Because when you think about it, both religion and science, they seem to kind of agree that the universe we know, it all came into being incredibly, incredibly fast.
Okay, let's unpack that. We're talking about the very beginning, the ultimate origin story, right?
Okay. You've got the book of Genesis. It tells that story of God creating the world in 6 days. Now, regardless of how you interpret the length of those days, the point is creation happened rapidly. Light, the sky, earth, plants, animals, and then us, it all just sprang into existence through God's power.
It's like a divine snap of the fingers, isn't it?
It really is.
1 minute, nothing. The next, a whole universe. I mean, honestly, how do you even wrap your mind around that kind of power?
Right. And then we look at science. You've got the Big Bang Theory.
Right.
This idea that the universe, it's started from this state of unimaginable density and heat. Then, in a fraction of a second, it expands rapidly outward, creating everything. It's as if everything was squeezed into this tiny, tiny point, and then, bam, explosion outward, creating space, time, and all the matter we see around us. It's mind-boggling.
So we have these two different perspectives, seemingly different anyway, faith and science, and they're both pointing to this idea of instantaneous creation. Really makes you think about what we don't know, doesn't it? There are forces at play in the universe that honestly we might never fully comprehend.
Totally.
But where do we as humans fit into all of this? I have a feeling this is more than just a lesson about stars and galaxies. It feels personal,
Absolutely. And that's where things start to get really, really interesting.
Yeah.
If God can create a universe in the blink of an eye, what does that mean for us? I mean, what does it mean for the challenges we face, the dreams we hold on to, even the impossible situations we find ourselves in? Those are the questions, right?
Now, those are questions worth pondering. And something tells me this book has some answers. So let's dive in, shall we? Let's see how this concept of instantaneous transformation, this blink of an eye idea, how it plays out in the Bible. Because I don't know about you, but I'm ready for a faith boost.
Oh, get ready, because the Bible is full of these amazing stories about God's power to change lives in an instant.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the universe anymore, right? It's about what can happen in our own lives to us when we open ourselves up to that power. It's pretty amazing stuff.
So we're talking about God's power to change lives, just like that, in an instant. And the Bible is full of stories about this. Do you have like a favorite example, one that really illustrates this?
Oh, there's so many. But the one that always gets me is the story of Saul on the road to Damascus. This guy, he was out there persecuting early Christians.
Yeah, he was not messing around.
Not at all. And then, bam, blinding flash of light, he's thrown to the ground, and he comes face to face with the risen Christ.
Talk about a wake-up call, right?
Yeah, no kidding. And it's not just a change of heart, it's a complete 180. Saul, who then becomes the Apostle Paul, goes from persecuting the faith to becoming one of its greatest champions, all in the blink of an eye.
It really makes you think about those moments in your own life, those times when you felt a shift, a calling, maybe a sudden burst of courage or clarity. Like, what if that was God doing his thing?
Exactly. I mean, these biblical stories, they might be ancient history, but that message, it's timeless. People from all walks of life, they have these moments where it feels like God breaks through. It could be a healing, an opportunity that appears out of nowhere, even just a sense of peace during a really tough time.
Yeah.
And it's like, in that split second, everything changes. It's powerful stuff.
It really is. And it reminds us that we're dealing with a God who isn't limited by our human understanding of time. But there's one event in the Bible that, when I think about this blink of an eye concept, it always comes to mind. The Rapture. It's supposed to happen just like that, right? In an instant.
You're right. The Rapture definitely takes this idea of instantaneous transformation to a whole other level.
Just to make sure everyone's on the same page, could you give us a quick refresher on what the Rapture is?
Absolutely. The Rapture, as it's described in 1 Corinthians 15.51 and 5-2, is basically this. Jesus Christ returns, and all the believers, those who have died and those who are still living, are caught up together in the air to meet him. And the key phrase here is, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. It's this sudden, incredible event that completely changes reality as we know it.
It's almost too much to comprehend, But then you think about the awe-inspiring power of God we've been talking about, creating the universe in an instant. And suddenly, the Rapture, while still mind-blowing, doesn't seem quite as far-fetched, does it?
It's all about perspective, isn't it? We serve a God who is not limited by our human constraints. He can do things that we can barely even imagine.
That's true. But let's be real, even with faith, it's hard to wrap our minds around these monumental events, you know what I mean?
It's okay to feel that sense of wonder, Even a little uncertainty, I think, is natural when we're trying to grasp something so outside of our normal experience. That's where trust comes in, having faith that even if we don't fully understand, God's plan is unfolding exactly as it should.
That's a good point. But speaking of awe-inspiring stories from the Bible, you mentioned healings, breakthroughs, things like that. What other examples does the book give about God's power to create change in the blink of an eye?
Well, there's the story of the angel of death. It's a little intense, but in 2 Kings 19.35, you've got this angel who descends upon the Assyrian army. They were about to wipe out Israel, by the way.
Oh, wow, yeah, things were looking bleak.
Totally. But overnight, this one angel, slays 185,000 soldiers. Just like that. It's a stark reminder that God can intervene in the most dire situations when everything seems lost and deliver us from the seemingly insurmountable.
Wow. It's like this divine reset, a chance for a fresh start when all hope seemed lost.
Exactly. And just like that story highlights God's protection, you've got the story of Jesus turning water into wine at the wedding at Cana. It's a reminder of his abundant provision. They're about to run out of wine at this wedding, which back then, social disaster.
Oh, yeah, that would be bad.
The worst. But Jesus, he steps in and performs this miracle, instantly turns water into the finest wine. It shows us that even when we think we've reached our limit, God can provide for us, and he can do it in the most unexpected and often instantaneous ways.
Like God saying, don't worry, I got this.
Precisely. And speaking of impossible situations, the story of Lazarus, it's about as dramatic as it gets. This man, Lazarus, he's been dead for 4 days. Then Jesus shows up, and with a single command, brings him back to life. Lazarus walks out of the tomb, still wrapped in burial cloths.
It's like death itself couldn't stand up to God. It's a powerful reminder that even when things seem completely hopeless, when we're in those situations where we're like, there's no way out, God has the power to breathe new life into those dry bones. He can turn things around, and he can do it like that.
It's truly remarkable. And, the book makes this point that all these instantaneous transformations, these miracles, they have something in common.
Yeah.
Faith, someone's belief, their trust in something bigger than themselves. That's what paved the way for those incredible moments to happen.
It makes you think about the potential of our own faith, But it's one thing to say, yeah, I believe in God. It's a whole other level to have that kind of faith that can move mountains, right? How do we even get there?
It's a great question. And that's where this whole mustard seed analogy comes in Matthew 17:20. Jesus tells his disciples, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. nothing will be impossible for you.
Such a great visual, really.
It is.
This tiny, tiny seed, practically invisible, can grow into something so strong, so impactful. It's like just a tiny bit of faith can have huge results.
Exactly. And it's not just about the size, but where we put that faith. It's about putting our trust in a God who is capable of so much more than we can even comprehend.
So it's about surrendering to that possibility that God can work in our lives in ways that we can't even begin to understand. And, we might not always see it happening, we might not get it, but that doesn't mean it's not real. It's about trusting in that power, even when we can't see the results.
It's easy to get caught up in these big epic stories, creation, the rapture, miracles like we've been talking about. But how does this whole blink of an eye thing, how does it apply to us? Like right here, right now in our regular lives?
That's what I was thinking. It's like we all have our own challenges, our own little victories day in and day out. Is God working that way in the ordinary too?
That's the amazing thing, he is. It might not always be flashy or super dramatic, but God is constantly at work. It's just that sometimes it's happening in these subtle ways that we might not even pick up on.
It's like that saying, right? God works in mysterious ways. Although sometimes, honestly, those mysterious ways, they can be kind of frustrating. We pray for things, we wait, and it feels like nothing's happening. It's easy to get discouraged.
I've been there. We all have. But that's where I think this whole blink of an eye thing could be so reassuring. God, he's on a different timeline than us, right? He's not bound by our schedules or our expectations. If we can wrap our heads around the fact that God created the entire universe in an instant, then we can trust that he can handle our prayers too. It might not be on our timetable, but he's got it.
So it's about surrendering to the bigger picture, trusting that even if we don't see it right now, God's got this.
Exactly. And sometimes that plan, it involves a sudden shift, a breakthrough that we could never have planned for, never have made happen on our own. It's like when everything seems impossible and then bam, a door flies open, or the perfect solution just falls into your lap. You know what I mean?
It's like in those nature documentaries when they show a caterpillar going through metamorphosis. It's kind of gross, actually.
It is.
Like, it looks chaotic, messy, like it's just disintegrating. But then, boom, this beautiful butterfly emerges. And you realize that just because we don't see the results right away doesn't mean something amazing isn't happening.
Oh, I love that. It really speaks to that transformative power that's hidden in those seemingly insignificant moments. And it reminds us to have faith not just in the huge life-altering things, but in those everyday miracles too. They're happening all around us.
Well, maybe it's not so much about waiting for a miracle to happen, but about realizing that miracles are happening all the time. It's about choosing to see them.
Now you're getting it. It's about shifting our perspective, looking for those glimpses of God's hand in the everyday stuff, those synchronicities, the chance encounters, the little blessings we might otherwise miss. It's about paying attention.
It's about holding on to that belief, even when we're struggling, that God can create opportunities, open doors, and bring about positive change in our lives. And it can happen quickly, unexpectedly. That's encouraging.
It really is.
Well, as we wrap up this amazing deep dive into the idea of instantaneous transformation, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
That's easy. Never underestimate the power of a single moment. In the blink of an eye, anything is possible. So walk through your days with a sense of wonder, with the expectation that God is working even when you can't see it, because when we have faith, truly anything is possible. And those possibilities, they can unfold in the blink of an eye. And on that note of awe and inspiration, we'll leave you to ponder the incredible power that exists within even the smallest fraction of time. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep the faith.